The Mandalorian is finally here, and so far, so good. The overall feeling of this felt like what a Star Wars movie should feel like. I know this isn't a movie, it's a series, but it had the level of not feeling like a series, but an actual movie, and I think the general aesthetics of it were correct, or at least what I think should be correct. Very similar to Rogue One. I think Rogue One hit the grittiness at a correct level, and it had some things that you're familiar with in the Star Wars universe. I didn't really care for the Rogue One story. This story here so far, you don't really know a lot yet. We're only about half an hour in, so not too much that you can criticize. It's not really too much about any characters or anything like that, nor would you expect to be this early on. So not really any mistakes or any real problems that I noticed, and I was definitely looking at it fairly critically because although I do like some Star Wars, I'm not that big a fan, particularly of the last film, The Last Jedi. I do think Solo's a lot better than The Last Jedi. Solo as well, I do think got the aesthetics of the world correct, or the universe correct, and that's really what they hit right on the nose here. They do a really good job. The special effects throughout were superb. They're a lot better than what you'll get in most Marvel movies. I do think that Lucasfilm still is the best studio around for special effects, and they've managed to bring their normal level of special effects from a movie here to a series. So it'll be interesting to see if they can keep that up, or if an extra amount of money was put in for the first episode and there'll be a reduced amount of visual effects. But so far, the visual effects are on par with the best effects that you'll see in any movie. So I'll discuss some of the things that happen in the episode, so I'll get a little bit spoilery here, so warning ahead, spoilers. Now it starts off with some footage that you've probably seen if you've seen any of the ads or some of the D23 sneak preview stuff. It's got some sort of tracking device. The Mandalorian's looking for some sort of bounty he's trying to track down, and he goes to a bar. And again, all of this footage was already released, and I think there was a new trailer released just yesterday which showed all of this, and it showed the bar fight that you get as well. So quite a fair bit of this first episode was already known beforehand. There's a large variety of different alien creatures. Some of them are creatures we've seen before, some of them aren't. This blue guy or aqua-coloured guy that's the actual target for the bounty, I don't think he's been in any Star Wars movie before. At least I'm not familiar with seeing whatever kind of creature he is. But all of the actual special effects makeup they're using, or the digital effects and all the characters, they all look very, very good. Okay, they all look excellent. Nothing looked out of place. It looked like they've done a really good job on making everything look top-notch. There's a fair few nods all throughout. If you know your Star Wars, there's a lot of reuse of sound effects. They've got the sound effect of the top hatch from the Millennium Falcon being used for the first door for the cantina thing that Mandalorian walks through. They've got a sort of new roundy-ish looking gonk droid doing the same kind of noise as the original gonk droids are doing, and it looks like they've done it the same way. You can clearly see it looks like a midget walking around, as a lot of the original little droids were. They've got this character here using the identical sound effects from the original Star Wars movie. He's got the exact same noise. I'm not sure what the species is called. I think he only appeared just in Star Wars on Tatooine before they take away. I think he's the creature that tells the Empire where the ship is actually located at. Maybe a different guy, maybe the same guy, I don't know. But yeah, that creature there, he makes another appearance. And when the Mandalorian asks for a speeder to transport him, this one here arrives again. It looks great, looks all good, all of the special effects. It's got a droid driving it, and he keeps up with the stuff from the original Star Wars. He's got some sort of problem with droids, presumably harkening back to the Clone Wars period, where droids were fighting and killing lots of people throughout the galaxy. But whatever the reason is, same thing as when the two droids R2-D2 and C-3PO try to go into the cantina in Mos Eisley in Star Wars: A New Hope, and they're told no droids allowed. He doesn't want to be in a speeder that's actually driven by a droid. One little touch that I liked was it actually showed the interior of his ship and how he can get around in it. One of the things that I just had a general dislike for with the Millennium Falcon is you didn't really see too much inside it. I know in the Solo movie it showed a little bit more, but I guess everything was left to your imagination, or they wanted to fill it out later on. Well, here you can actually see how he gets up and down from his cockpit. He actually has a ladder that he has to go up and down from. And they actually show he has a toilet, so you have to presume there's a toilet on a lot of these spaceships, but we do in fact see a Star Wars space toilet. Now, my only real piece of criticism for this is the carbon freezing. The little guy that he's got a bounty on goes downstairs in his ship looking for a toilet, and he discovers that there are two guys that have been carbon frozen. And my main problem with that, I guess, from this scene, twofold. The first problem is the way that carbon freezing was presented in The Empire Strikes Back. It wasn't something you put people into. This sounded like this was one of the first times they did it. I think Lando said something to Vader like, if you put Han into that, it might kill him. And Boba Fett says, I don't want, if he dies, he's worth a lot to me. And Vader says, we'll test it up first on Han Solo. We don't want to get the Emperor's prize, Luke, damaged first, and so on. So carbon freezing wasn't something you actually put a person into. It wasn't obviously something that bounty hunters were doing. It just happened to be something that happened to Han. Now, throughout the many years afterwards, it's obviously built into some sort of big deal where maybe this is something bounty hunters do, but I don't think that was established in any of the actual canon. Maybe in additional material, which is completely discounted by Disney, but actually using carbon freezing, a little bit of a nod back to, obviously, Han Solo getting frozen in it, but I don't think that's something they should really be using. Not a big deal, but that's as good as a criticism I can come up with, except for the fact that he actually has a carbon freezing unit on his ship. And so, again, back to The Empire Strikes Back, it looked to me like the carbon freezing device was an extremely large industrial area in Cloud City, where obviously later on Luke and Vader fight around. But it doesn't look like a little thing. It looks like a very large device is required to put something into carbon freeze. He's got a little miniature carbon freezer on his actual ship, so I don't think that necessarily should have been there. I think it's very nitpicky, and again, that's about as good as I can do for any kind of criticism at all. So no real criticism yet, but I do think that he definitely shouldn't have had a carbon freezing device on his ship to stay true with the scale and the size of the thing from The Empire Strikes Back. Another little nod that was used to Return the Jedi was this thing in the door, whatever it's called, the thing that was on the Jabba the Hutt's palace that greets C-3PO and R2-D2 at the start of the film. It's the exact same thing used here in this other doorway that the Mandalorian's using. They use the same audio for the start of it, but at least they don't use the laughter that the one in Jabba's palace had. I think that definitely would have been incorrect, and it's presumably saying, what do you want in whatever language that it's actually speaking in. I would have presumed it was in Huttes or Huttese, however you say that, but this planet isn't Tatooine, and we don't see any Hutts yet, so not sure what the language is, but it's identical to the Return of the Jedi sound that it makes, except it doesn't have the laughter, and I definitely think it should not have had the laughter. And, of course, we get some stormtroopers. In the ads for this, it showed some stormtrooper helmets. We knew that there'll be some stormtroopers. These stormtroopers obviously look like they've not cleaned their uniforms for a while. The only real question I have is why they would actually be wearing these uniforms. Okay, we can presume that these guys were stormtroopers, the Empire's collapsed, and now they're no longer actually stormtroopers, they're working, as guards or whatever they're doing, but we've seen over and over again that their armor is worthless. Okay, if their armor works, then yes, by all means, keep wearing your body armor in whatever other professional capacity in the future. But the body armor doesn't work, and it paints you as being an ex-Imperial soldier. I think it's a very bad idea for anyone to be wearing that armor unless they're actually forced to wear it. But I guess that's a very, very minor criticism. So there's another criticism I have for it. But they had to be there. They had to have stormtroopers in at some point. And I think it's obviously a problem everything that Star Wars has, is that how much of this stuff do we have to put in, and how much new stuff can we get there? If we do nothing but new stuff, is there any point to it being associated with Star Wars? And at the same time, we don't want to see the same stuff over and over again. There was a funny moment, at least I laughed a little bit at it. It had one of the Salacious Crumb creatures. I'm not sure what the creatures are called, but that's what the character was called in Return of the Jedi. And it was on a spit, and it's getting cooked up. And as the camera pans down, we can see another one in a cage seeing his friend or his colleague there getting cooked up. And it makes a little bit of a noise. And I had a little giggle at that, a little bit of silly humour, but I thought it was a nice little touch. One of the main spoilery things for the series going forward is there are lots of Mandalorians. So what we see is some sort of Mandalorian hideout or Mandalorian house, and they refer to it as the tribe. And there are lots of people with Mandalorian helmets on, so there's lots of Mandalorians available. He's called the Mandalorian, or the series is called the Mandalorian, but there's lots of Mandalorians, so I was actually surprised at that. I thought he would be the only person wearing the Mandalorian armor we see in the series, but there's lots of them, and that's probably going to it's probably going to be the actual core of what's going on this season. There's a lot of things I don't really understand, which I think is good, so going forward there'll be some questions to be answered. Maybe some of this stuff is in the expanded universe information, I don't know, but he got paid in some sort of metal bar that looks like the metal bar was minted out of old Mandalorian armor. At least that's what I'm interpreting it as. And the Mandalorian armor actually looks like it works. So we didn't really see Boba Fett ever get shot in the original trilogy, so we don't really know how good the Mandalorian armor is. Again, according to the canon movies and so on, not any kind of expanded universe information. But here we see this guy get shot a lot. He takes quite a few bullets, and they bounce off. So he's actually got some real armor. And so the Mandalorian armor looks like something that's very useful to have, particularly if you're in some sort of fight. And so he's paid with one of these bars, and one of the other Mandalorians, a female Mandalorian, she melts it down and makes a little shoulder piece for him. So it looks like he's slowly reconstituting his armor, and it also looks like some of the leftover metals that, I guess it was too much metal to make his shoulder piece, or whatever that's called, pauldron, whatever we want to call that, that was donated to the tribe, it sounds like. So it sounds like there's some sort of symbiotic, sort of the tribe looking out for each other while you make your own armor kind of thing. I don't know, something like that. Again, not really well explained, but sort of questions that they should keep for later on. So something interesting to see what's happening. And again, I was pretty surprised that there are lots of Mandalorians, and he's not just a loner. That was my assumption. This is a loner. They're making a kind of Western. He's a gunslinger. He doesn't have any friends. Well, it looks like he's got some sort of allies here he could call on if he really needed to. And then the last main thing that seems to be going around the internet a little bit right now is from the very end of the episode. This little creature here, this 50-year-old creature, it's the same race as Yoda. It's obviously a very young creature in Yoda terms. 50 years old, looks like a little baby. Yoda, we know, lived to be 900 years or something like that. What did he say? He trained Jedi for 800 years, so he lived to be over 800 years old. So looks like they live for a long time, and I guess they're a baby for a very long time. So we'll see more of this creature going forward. I wonder how many of these will be on the shelves for Christmas. Is this going to be a popular item to sell on Christmas? It looks a little bit like a gremlin. It does have big eyes, as they put on a lot of children, not kids, but on something that's supposed to be young. The main way to try to convey that is to put big eyes on it. The eyes probably could have been even bigger. But is this going to be a big selling toy for Christmas? We'll see what happens. But it looks like that to me. So all in all, I'll be looking forward to the next episode, which I think's out in a couple of days. I think it's out on a weekly basis, but they've got 2 episodes coming out in the first week. So a couple of days' time, episode 2 will be out. And so far, no complaints. Everything is fine so far. We'll see how the story pans out. I mean, that's really going to be the crux of this, whether it works or not. Is it going to be an interesting arc, an interesting story? But all of the stuff they had to do right, they do right here. The special effects are good. The general feel of it is Star Wars. So, good so far. Is it enough to rescue the franchise? We'll see. But so far, so good. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.